to another miniature crochet video. Now you might think I'm starting this video off in a peculiar place for a mini crochet vid, but today I want to talk about the embroidery threads that come with cross stitch kits. Now, cross stitching is another of my hobbies, and I don't know about you, but if you've ever done a cross stitch kit, you'll know that you have lots of threads left over at the end of the project. That's because they obviously always supply more than you need. And today I want to talk about how to crochet with those threads. But first of all, let me show you some of the cross stitches that I've completed over the years. And this lovely blue and white crockery dresser cross stitch was one of my earlier kits, and I actually ended up doing it on a larger canvas than they suggested. So I think it was only meant to be about 20 inches high, and it's come out a lot larger than that. And this took me many years to complete because I sort of just dipped in and out of it over the years. And I only actually framed this one last year. Now this one here was actually the first cross stitch kit I ever did, and a friend that I was working with at the time had won this in a competition, and they really weren't interested in cross stitching, so they gave it to me, and I really enjoyed doing it. And this is really what started off my love of cross stitching. And I'm just going to sort of pop a hand in there so you can see the size of that one. So that's probably about, I don't know, 10 inches across. And I made lots of mistakes in there, but one of the good things about cross stitch is that you can't always see the mistakes. These next two are a set, and my auntie actually picked these up in a charity shop, and she knew how much I like cross stitch, so she passed those over to me, and I really love them. I love birds and wildlife, so these really were perfect for me, and I love that they're in these oval frames as well. So the little wrens there, and then the blue tits up here. Lovely bright colourful ones there. And over the last 6 months or so I've completed these three, and these are all Rendale designs and produced by Bothy Threads. And my plan is to do 6 in this series and then have them framed and hang them up as a set, which I think will look really nice. And once you've completed your cross stitch kit, what you're left with is what looks like a complete tangle of threads. If you've done embroidery or cross stitch before, you'll know that they are actually quite easy to separate, so I'll just show you how I do that. So each of these strands is made up of 6 individual threads. So you would just sort your strand out like that, and then take one of the threads, like that, so just separate one out, hold tightly onto the rest, and then just pull the single thread through your fingers like that, and the whole thing will sort of tangle up, but you'll release the thread. So that's how easy they are to sort of separate from what looks like a tangle. Now, a good way of actually sorting out your threads is to wrap them around a little card. So you can buy these little cards, or even make them yourself, I suppose, and they've got like an area to wrap the thread around, and then a little cutout there to put the end of the thread through, just to keep them on the card. And I have actually started sorting. I've only done a couple so far, so that's going to take me a while, but that would be a lot easier if they were all sort of laid out in there and I could see what colour I wanted to get to. So I'll pop that to one side for now. And then the other thing, of course, as well, is that when you buy a cross stitch kit, there's likely to be a really nice set of colours. So on each of these cards, you've got a sort of predetermined colour scheme for your crocheted throw. So you can either use some or all of the colours. And just looking at all of those lovely sort of oranges and creams and golds, you could then outline that with the darker colour here, this sort of browny black colour, and that would look really nice. Same with this one, all these lovely sort of yellows, teals, browns, golds. They all in themselves just make really nice colour schemes for your crocheted throws. So I now want to show you a little crocheted throw that I'm working on at the moment, and I'm using this selection of threads. I've got all these sort of lovely pinks and pale greens in there, And I'm just doing a little random coloured blanket, and then I'm going to do a border in cream around the outside edge. So I'm using a 0.5mm crochet hook, which is a number 22. And with these cottons, I've sort of been doing a little bit of experimenting. So you can get a centre and a second round. So I haven't got them here, but a centre and a second round from one strand. And then you can do a third round from one strand and a fourth round as well. To do a fifth round, you would need to join two strands together, and then you'd still have a little bit left over to do either a middle and a second. But the thing that you need to think about is if you want to go larger than 4 rounds, and I normally do 5 rounds, then you have to think about if you have enough thread, because then obviously once you'd done your 5th round, you would then want to go around the entire blanket with another row just to neaten off the outside edge. Now here I wouldn't have enough of one colour to do all of the outside edges or all of the borders and then the final border around the outside. So what I'm actually going to do around the outside is use my normal DMC Special Dentelles number 80 thread. Now just comparing these two, so comparing my number 80 crochet cotton with the thread, I think although the thickness seems to be the same, the texture is slightly different. So the crochet thread feels quite heavy, if you know what I mean, sort of quite strong, whereas the embroidery thread is nice and soft. So whether it is just the texture that is different, I'm not sure, but the thickness looks the same, and it's really difficult to tell, obviously trying to compare the thickness of something that is so fine. But that's actually what I want to try now. So I want to have a go at doing the outside border using the thicker thread and just see how that looks. So let's do that now. So just doing the final little cluster here. Yeah, I think that's worked. I was worried that the crochet cotton might look a little bit too heavy or a lot thicker than the embroidery thread, but that does actually work really well. So as I was crocheting the square, I only made chains in the corners. So I just do a 2 chain in each corner, and I don't do a chain in between the clusters. And I just find that that keeps it nice and tight. Yeah, I'm really pleased with that. So I can use this colour is called Ecru, so I'm going to use the Ecru around the outside edge of all of the squares, and then I can do a final border around the entire blanket with that. And I normally do a blanket made up of 24 squares, which is 6 by 4, and that just fits nicely at the end of a 12th scale double bed. But obviously you can do them as large as you like. You might want to do a bed runner, and I normally do those 9 by 3, so 27 squares, and that then drops down the side of the bed. But if you're unsure of what to do, you can just make up a couple of squares and then actually, you know, place them along the bottom of your bed to see how wide or how high up the bed you want it to go, and just do it that way. Okay, so what I want to do now is use the embroidery thread with a smaller hook. So I'm going to be using a 0.4mm hook, which is a number 24. Okay, so I've done 4 rounds here using the embroidery thread, and again I'm going around the outside with the Ecru number 80 crochet cotton. So in terms of the strands sort of doing more rounds, they don't really, there's just a little bit more left over, but not enough then to go in and do, you know, a middle or anything like that. So you don't really get more rounds out of the individual strands. But what I would say I found with this and using the 5mm hook is when you're doing the 4th round, there's very little left at the end to tie off the square, so it just fits, so one strand just does that 4th round. So when you start, don't leave too long a tail, otherwise you'll find that you'll get to the end and you haven't got enough then to finish it off, you know, to do the slip and then tie it off. So that's just one thing to think about. Also, I'd probably say with these sort of finer cottons, you don't want to go much larger than a 0.5 hook. You could probably get away with using it with a 0.75, but if you were to go up to a number 1 hook, that's going to be too large for the finer thread, and you'll get a really sort of loose square. So there is the completed square. And if we compare that now to the square I did using the 0.5mm hook, you can see that is quite a bit larger. So the larger of those is 20.5mm, which is 13/16 of an inch, and our smaller one is 19.5mm, which is 3/4 of an inch. If you were to do a 5 round square using a 0.5mm hook and the DMC number 80 crochet cotton, that would measure 22mm, which is 7/8 of an inch. So they're going up by a couple of millimeters each time. And thinking about it, you can actually order the embroidery thread in skeins. So if you wanted to order a separate skein to do your borders and then your outside edge, you could do that, and that would make them even smaller, probably only by about 0.5 millimetre, but in this miniature scale even 0.5 millimetre makes a difference, so that might be worth trying. So you're still going to have lots of little ends of thread left over, and what I do is keep them all in a little pot, and I have this in my crochet box, and then these are really good to use for stuffing. Really lovely and soft, and you can cut them up and then use them for stuffing pillows or cushions or other sort of small projects. So always keep hold of all your little cut-offs. And if you haven't got a crochet box like mine, then you can just put like a little plastic pot in with your crochet supplies and keep them in there. Okay, so that's it for today. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you're left over with lots of tangled embroidery threads, I hope you'll give this a go. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.